This video is just going to be about my ADHD journey, not about photography. So I was diagnosed when I was 52, I think, with ADHD after having a horrific time really in menopause, just really heightened menopause symptoms, massive anxiety, depression, brain fog, as well as obviously all the other menopausal symptoms. Had a bit of burnout in terms of work and probably not performing to the best of my abilities, when in the past I'd always performed well and there'd never been a problem. And I guess I'd always kind of questioned and thought there was something else, something that I felt a little bit different than my peers in some ways, and I had put that down to being gay or bisexual or being a bit of a hippie or lefty, but as I got older, it seemed to be something a little bit more than that, but I could never quite put my finger on it. I questioned whether I was had autism or was autistic at one point, but again, I didn't think that I fit the criteria when reading some of the questionnaires. And by chance, I happened to watch a YouTube video, and it was a man sort of talking about the educational journey of what it looked like with someone with ADHD, and it was a light bulb moment, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's me. I always felt a lot brighter than my grades kind of showed at school, but then I never really did any work or any revision and sort of scraped through exams. I was lucky enough to I'm old enough to get O-levels and A-levels. Went to university but dropped out twice, never really lasting the course. Did various courses, like being a lab technician. I'd always wanted to be a nurse and saw an advert in for a post to be a student nurse, and didn't think I'd be able to because I'd already been to university and used up all my grants. So I applied and got in, and that was absolutely the ideal career, I think, for me, is in terms of it can be quite fast paced, and ADHD brains are quite good in a crisis situation, and can be quite calm, even though we probably find chaos in the mundane. So anyway, going back to after watching that YouTube video, I started to read a little bit more about ADHD and thought, oh, okay, that sounds like me. And I thought, shall I go for diagnosis? And I think because of the trouble that I was having at working in the work environment, I wanted to just give myself answers, not necessarily for the label, not that necessarily it would at my age open up many more doors or necessarily offer help, but for me it would be an explanation, and maybe also an explanation in terms of work of how my performance had suffered, not only to menopause, which wasn't really recognised at that point either, but also being neurodiverse in a workplace. So I did go for diagnosis, and at that time, luckily, there wasn't too much of a waiting list as there is now. I think it was about 2 years from getting the first sort of questionnaires and getting the assessment and then starting on medication, which I was a bit scared about at first, but once I got my diagnosis, I thought, well, I might as well try. I've gone this far. So started on methotrexate, which has been brilliant. Absolutely, I would recommend it. And I know for some people it takes trial and error with different meds to see which work and which don't. But I was lucky enough to try methylphenidate. I think it was Zagatin for me, that actually worked really well. Even things like I felt like I could hear better. because the noise wasn't in my head with all the cluttered thoughts and the amount of thoughts that were going, it just gave a bit more clarity and not so much noise. And I think I might have a little bit of auditory processing anyway, so even the meds sort of helped what I sort of found as like hearing better, and I was able to get up in the morning a little bit better than wanting to just go, you know, literally having to painfully drag myself out of bed, and just having that little bit more motivation again and that little bit more spark again, that I probably had about, 20 years ago, and well before menopause. So for me, it has really helped, and helped me with the executive dysfunction and things as well. My brain often works too fast for my body anyway, which does make me a little bit clumsy at times, and I do bang into things, and I will forget really simple things, but my brain is going 100 miles an hour and often sees the big picture in things, and can sort of solve the problem before most people have sort of figured out the first sentence. But then, because my brain is working so quickly, it sometimes forgets silly things, like, to sign a bit of paper, or, cross the I's and dot the T's, the other way around. So that's what I have to be careful of and mindful of. And because your brain is so full of thoughts, I think that's sometimes what makes you forgetful, is you forget because you're too busy thinking, forget where you've put things or put things down, or where you've written important dates. So for me, Apple Notes and reminders has been absolute lifesavers, and I just write everything in there to remind myself, because otherwise I think I'll remember, but I know that I won't. So do those type of things to help. And I always put my keys in a certain place now, and if someone else moves them or moves where I've put things, it absolutely sends me into an absolute panic and worry that I'm going to be late and can't find things, and drives the anxiety up. So I do have to have a certain place where I put things where I know they're going to be, and if someone tidies away and puts things away, it drives me a bit nuts, because even if it might be in a messy pile, I kind of know what my messy pile is and where things are and where I can find them. So it's really hard to explain that to somebody sometimes. And likewise, I am messy, but I'm not that messy, and like to clean. But if mess gets beyond a certain point, then I become overwhelmed and won't be able to clean that up. So sometimes, living in a household of neurodivergent people, if that mess becomes too much of a mess, it's really hard for me then to tackle that mess, because I find it too overwhelming. Sorry, cat. And I can find I get overstimulated after lots of social interactions, and that includes work. As in, I know I'm good in social communications, and do pick up on nuances and can read the room quite well, almost in terms of a kind of sixth sensey sort of way. But I get very overstimulated, and by the end of a working week, absolutely go into a bit of a shutdown for a bit, where sometimes it's like even difficult to hold a conversation or talk, just because I've had so much of that throughout the week that I just need brain time to recover, which sometimes as well, hopefully it doesn't seem, I don't think it's I'm rude, it's just like I am absolutely exhausted and just need time just to come back to life again almost. And there's such a lost generation of, especially women sort of my age, I'm 54, that, that are just learning now that they possibly are neurodiverse one way or, on either autistic or ADHD or both, or have some other comorbidities in there as well. I'd always been diagnosed with anxiety and or depression in the past as well, when I think that I do suffer with generalised anxiety, but obviously it was undiagnosed ADHD for a lot of years. So struggled with my mental health, especially sort of in hormonal changes, so through puberty,